Yeah, and the airport was actually that big in Dubai. It was a 45-minute bus ride from one side to the other, all powered by Splunk.
Was it air conditioned
It was.
outside? I heard it was
Yeah,
air conditioned outside.
the whole Dubai airport is actually in an air conditioned bubble. So pretty incredible. It was a
I
great
didn't
trip.
know you were in Dubai.
There you go. I don't like to talk about it.
Just
Because it was in Geneva. That's why he doesn't like to
There's
talk
no
about
Geneva. If I can't go to Geneva, what is the point?
right.
Anyway, welcome to Coffee Talk with Serge. My name is Ryan Kovar. This is Mick Baccio and Audra Streetman, and we are here today to talk about a few of our favorite things. Maybe some vulnerabilities, Audra. Maybe
Some.
some Cybersecurity Awareness Month, Marcus.
Maybe it's more vulnerabilities.
Maybe
Or
not, Marcus.
there's always AI, right?
There's always AI. These are things we're going to talk about. I'm excited. We see some people coming in.
Yeah. Hi,
Victoria,
Victoria.
Jenny, all sorts of people. Welcome, as always. Feel free to put in chats, and we'll be able to talk about it, and we'll answer questions as they come up. We're going to give a shout out to Queerty, of course, and then also to Drew Church, who's somewhere floating out to sea. We have a new voice of God producer. Why don't you say hello? Come off mute, Daniela.
You're putting her on the spot.
Always. That's what I do.
Hello,
Hello.
everyone.
There she is.
Happy to be here.
She'll be helping us for the rest of the duration, which is wonderful. We're very excited to have her. But first, why don't we go to the news? Let's roll the news clip. See what we have for the week.
All right. So I've been trying to keep up with all of these vulnerabilities that have come out just in the last several days. And of course, some of them were on a Friday afternoon because wouldn't be a Friday afternoon without some
Nope.
critical vulnerabilities, right? So I figured we could start off with diving into some of these. The one that sticks out to me to start with is a remote code execution vulnerability. And this was announced, I believe this was on Friday, in Progress Software's WSFTP. And so this over the weekend, there were some developments with this. So Asset Note, researchers there, they released a proof of concept exploit for this. It's a maximum severity, so a 10 CVSS score execution vulnerability in FTP server, which is a file sharing platform. And if Progress Software sounds familiar, this is the same company that announced the Move It vulnerability in May. Which is also a file transfer platform. And Move It, which I'm sure you're all familiar, was exploited by a data extortion group called CLOP, and they've so far targeted more than 2,000 organizations, more than 62 million people. We're still learning about more organizations compromised months later after this vulnerability in Move It was announced. So now there's another critical vulnerability in another file transfer appliance from the same company. This latest vulnerability, it's a .NET deserialization issue. And Rapid7 actually put out a blog post over the weekend as well. They say that they have observed exploitation in the wild. And the interesting thing about this is that of all the exploitation that they've observed, it all links back to the same burp suite domain. So they think that that could mean that there is a single threat actor behind this activity. Whether or not that threat actor is CLOP, like it was with the Move It vulnerability, remains to be seen. But if it is, that could mean we have a Move It 2.0 happening, which would obviously be very concerning when you look at the number of organizations impacted in that first vulnerability, which is still ongoing. So what do you make of that, Ryan and Mick? Are you concerned?
I want to know where you stand on the OST debate here, Audra. Offensive security tooling, good or bad? Burp Suite used to destroy the world?
No, I think it's a cat and mouse game, right? You can't have cybersecurity without innovation, and part of that is offensive tools. How else are you supposed to test your defenses, right? It goes both ways. That's my stance on it. But
Ooh, Mick,
what do you think?
what are your thoughts here? I
On
know you
this
hate hackers.
specifically, like it's an FTP vulnerability. I feel like we've seen it a lot this year. I think the potential for Move It 2.0, which I think would be 1.1, right? 1.2, 1.1. I think it'd be big whether it was CLOP or not, right? Like I get it. You want CLOP is there. But if it's not CLOP and it's just someone else as part of a different group or an independent group, that spells even bigger trouble. I just feel like it's bad all over. Tooling, this is Burp. Burp's been around for a while. I don't think it's bad. I don't think offensive tooling is bad. I think that you shouldn't make offensive tools debate is dumb, and that distracts from the real problem. Is just, there's maybe an S-bomb would have fixed this.
Mick Baccio thinks hackers are dumb. Rolling at 11. I think, we talked a lot about this. Audra, yeah, this is exactly what you said, Mick. I don't want to your words.
I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah. Mick Baccio hates Klopp and thinks their mothers are ugly.
No, they have scanners.
What am I, Rob Lee? I think you called this out a while ago, Audra, of like this move from ransom to extortionware, and we should stop saying ransomware. We've had talks about this, right? I think we should just really go back to. I feel like we stopped using the word crimeware because we thought that was diminutive of like criminal organizations. Like, oh, it's not Zeus, it's way worse. And now it's just like, no, actually, like. It's really just bad people are hacking things to get money. It's just a business opportunity now, right? Like, and this is another example. We're saying Klopp, which everyone calls a ransomware group, but there's no ransomware binary for MoveIt. There's no ransomware binary for WSF-FTP, right? This is
right.
extortion.
Yep. And that's why I'm trying to get into the habit of saying data extortion group. And then you can clarify if there is encryption. Because I think a lot of times with ransomware, we assume there's encryption involved because of historically how it's been used. But yeah, a lot of these groups, Klopp included, are moving away from that and just they're just exfiltrating and then using that as leverage for extortion. And I think, so it's been effective. I think that Klopp is getting paid significantly from MoveIt, right? I mean, just by scale alone, they're going to get paid. And that further incentivizes them. So it is a problem. And yes, it may not be as severe in terms of downtime for an organization if their systems are still functioning because they're not encrypted. But that data extortion aspect is still concerning. And when you consider the number of people who have been impacted, I think you have to take that seriously. It's not just a data breach. It's beyond that when you look at the scale of MoveIt. That's my take anyway. So
I think for me,
Mick, I know he said something before this too. I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that, Mick. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
putting you on the spot.
In conversations I've had with folks from the ransomware task force, this MoveIt incident, and you see the data breach notifications that are being sent out to people that their PII has been stolen. That has been categorized as a data breach incident, not a ransomware incident. Data extortion, I don't think has fit into a policy category yet or a policy level response. So until that changes, those are the guidelines that we're operating within.
Some of the things I find interesting about this, I'm a reluctant economics nerd, and just one of the things I've loved about ransomware over the years has been the economics of it, because it's like capitalism. It's like Adam Smith's dream in terms of just raw economics. And something I find interesting about this is we saw the conversation changed with ransomware over the years, because it went from like, I need to pay this to get my data back, to I'm going to lose my data no matter what. The decryption doesn't work super well, and I really just have to pay for recovery or disaster recovery. Like we saw this with, I believe it was that Irish hospital that paid for the decryption key, and it still took them 5 months to get their data decrypted because of the scale of the encryption, right? If you go to this now where it's like, hey, I have your data, I'm going to release it. If you pay me, I delete it. There's no impact to your business. This is a pretty clean transaction. Like it's actually economically a reasonable, like it's an increase in product output for them, right? Like it's a better gimmick. I think they just found a better widget to sell in the crimeware space.
And I think a lot of this is because with ransomware, there are a lot of issues with encryptors, decryptors, right? Like even if a group encrypts, exfiltrates, and then the company pays and they try to get them their data back, there's no guarantee that their decryptor is going to even work. Yeah. And that can be problematic if you keep running into that from a ransomware group's point of view. But then again, if you're able to just completely ignore the encryption stage and still get paid, obviously double extortion when you have encryption, that is more likely to lead to a payment because you have more leverage. But clearly with MoveIt, we've seen that that's not necessarily required for these groups. So it'll be interesting to watch and see how that evolves. But we do have other vulnerabilities to get to. I know, quite a few, which we'll just touch on because we don't have too much time to spend on all of these. But I did want to highlight that there was another vulnerability, I think on Friday, that came out with Exim mail servers. And at first the news was, oh my gosh, we have millions of mail servers that are vulnerable to this critical remote code execution vulnerability. And it's a 0-day. But it turns out over the weekend, because this was disclosed, a coordinated public disclosure through the 0-day initiative. But it turns out that it's dependent on the use of external authentication on servers that are vulnerable. And the servers that are vulnerable have to have certain configuration requirements. So that definitely reduces the number of vulnerable mail servers. It's still something to check on to make sure that if you qualify with a vulnerable server, you definitely want to patch that. And there are patches now for 3 of the 6 vulnerabilities that are all 0 days disclosed last week. So that's the update there. And I think it was Watchtower Labs that put out a list of the configuration requirements for vulnerable servers, if you're interested in looking at that. And then there was also SharePoint, Microsoft SharePoint Server. There was an authentication bypass vulnerability with a proof of concept exploit released on GitHub. I think it was a researcher from Pwn to Own Vancouver who demonstrated this, chaining the SharePoint vulnerability for the authentication bypass, chaining that with another vulnerability that could lead to remote code execution. And so that's obviously concerning. And so I believe there is a patch out for that as well. So if you haven't patched, you definitely should look into it. And I think for the SharePoint one, there was a patch, and then the mitigation advice was like enable Defender and then like AMSI. Try to integrate that with your servers, which I thought was interesting. Because AMSI is kind of another example of like the cat and mouse game between bypasses and then, added defenses to try to, if that's an effective mitigation, that I guess that's a whole nother conversation. So
I just call my good friend SharePoint administrator Edward Snowden. He says it's fine. Everything's good. So
Good.
move on.
Yeah, so those are just a few. We could go on. I know there was a Cisco VPN 0-day that was announced. Microsoft Edge and Teams put out fixes for the WebLibP library, had a vulnerability. It was initially a Chrome issue, but then they realized, oh, the scope is much wider than that. This is browsers, this is applications, it's libraries, it's much bigger, but a lot of those patches have rolled out. So those are just a few. And then I also saw something that just got released about a Qualcomm 3 new 0 days under active exploitation. So I could go on, but
well, we have this
much
question come up, right? Like one of the things
Yeah.
our team does is a lot of rapid response, and we've gotten very, I think, good over the last couple of months of not responding to everything that comes up, because so much of it is frankly exactly the same, or things that our threat research team has already covered in detections. But it does feel like, we used to say this was a summer of CVEs, but I guess this is just the year of CVEs that continues into now we're a week into autumn, right? So there we go. This summer of my discontent has turned into autumn of my destruction.
Well, it's just, is this going to be how it is, and is it going to continue to become more prevalent, and how does that impact like initial access vectors? Are vulnerabilities going to become much more prevalent compared to phishing? Or I think phishing will still stay the number one, but could that gap narrow, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
I think one of the biggest issues is one of the Exim vulnerability is it's amusing slightly. I'm not trying to downplay the severity of the vulnerabilities and the exploits, but so you're telling me when we first find out, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, and then when more details come out, it's not as bad as we thought.
Well, the trouble with that too is there was a 15-month.
That's the trouble with that. We do it every time, and we had to stop. Trying to the fear mongering and the FUD that gets floated out when there's a vulnerability. It really lets us. It doesn't make the other ones that are severe get the attention they deserve.
Right, and part of that is the disclosure process, right? Because there was a 15-month period between when this was privately disclosed to the vendor and then when the 0-day initiative came out with a public disclosure, because there hadn't been any action within 15 months. And that raises the question of, could this have been a more clearer release had there been more coordination, right?
I mean, when was it released to the Chinese government? I think is the question we all want to know.
Yeah, that's valid.
Say what you will about that, but when you mandate disclosures to the government within like a responsible reporting time, you kind of keep on track of a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I feel if that's, I know you can't mandate that here because, the way it's set up, but our disclosure process is clearly broken. If you talk to Casey Ellis and the team over at Broadcrowd, even over HackerOne, it's just, the process is broken. It doesn't incentivize anyone to disclose things to the vendors to act responsibility. There's no punitive efforts if they don't.
Mick Baccio defends PRC, News at 11.
Man, I am having my greatest hits
Well,
this show.
it's also
Speaking
Russia.
of hits, what about communism?
I saw there was a tweet, I think it was Joe Slowick tweeted that the Exim, the latest really bad Exim vulnerability was actually used by Sandworm to build up their proxy infrastructure back in like 2019, 2020 was a tweet I saw. So it just, there are examples of nation state, groups taking advantage of that. So, but shall we move on? Because I know we have a lot to get to.
Yeah. I mean, we're already 16 minutes in, right?
Are we? Time flies. Okay, we want to talk about ChatGPT, right? Because there were some developments last week with that, new capabilities, which includes voice conversations with ChatGPT. So now you can speak to it instead of typing only.
Which,
and that's something.
Shannon Davis has always spoken to ChatGPT. So.
Well, that's Steve.
No, he just speaks to his computer generally, even before there was generative AI. He just yelled at it to be fixed.
Yeah, that's valid. And then also the thing that I think is crazy is this image, the fact that you can upload pictures now to ChatGPT. And this is one tweet I saw of a whiteboarding session where they were able to upload that, and then ChatGPT sent them code for what their whiteboarding session was about. Or you could even do like a SaaS dashboard, upload that, and then it'll give you code just based on the dashboard. And I just think that is it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it changed the game a lot in so many different ways that could be explored or could fall flat on their face. We'll see. I think the one that I was most impressed by for those of us city dwellers that have seen parking signs that are 8 or 9 high in different hours, someone took a picture of it and said, "Hey, it's Tuesday at 4 p.m. Can I park here?" And it spit out, "Yes, you could park here for an hour." And that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Now, when is that going to be part of the augmented reality feature in Google Maps?
It's amazing. Yeah. Two of the other things I've seen that I really haven't dug into, I really want to. One is Google Slides, I think, has the ability to generative AI on slides, which I think is going to be a game changer for a lot of people and just, a force multiplier. And from a product perspective, if I get a hold of your architecture, does that mean I can develop my own security tool that is the same as yours but not yours? If I'm making that OST, can I say, "Hey, write something that'll bypass this"? So I think that it's really, there's a lot of different ways this can go. And I'm.
Isn't that the entire Wiz Orca lawsuit?
Well, there's a lot of copyright issues with what the data is trained on and then what you can use it to recreate. But it's not proprietary data. If you're taking an image of something that's publicly available and then able to deduce using generative AI how to recreate
if it's
that.
on my phone, it's publicly available. So
exactly.
I believe that's how copyright law works.
Not hiring you for lawyering. That's my.
It's fine.
I can see you get very complicated very fast with legal challenges. So
it's we spent. I spent a whole bunch of time last week talking about generative AI and getting some, talking about the work that Tamara and our team did a joint session where we did a jam, writing a script with generative AI for Python. And, I don't really write Python anymore. And as Marcus would tell you, was never very good at it. Tamara is, she hasn't done a lot of Python. So we were able to bang out a pretty complicated Python script in like 45 minutes. And the idea that we could have written it on a white paper, whiteboard, and then taken a photo and just finished our day, that's already a faster, time to value there. So I think these are the sort of things like we talk about on our team. For those who don't know, Surge does not deal with Splunk product at all. We use it. We don't, we hopefully influence with some of our ideas, but we're not involved in the product management or developing. So we've really been looking at generative AI of like, how does a SOC have an amplifier or an augmentation? And like, these are just good examples of, putting these things into play. And I'm excited for this a lot. I think it really gets rid of some of the boring part, but it does come down to, even that work that Tamara and I did, it was about 90% there. It was working-ish, but we had to work with James Hodgkinson on our team, where he's taking it the next mile to make it scalable and usable and 100% worthwhile versus something that, this proof of concept worked great, but we can't actually use this for for production. So at least for right now, I think we got 6 more months.
Sounds like you're describing the team. You're describing not ready for production, but really helpful, not scalable, but it'll be really good for you. I'm not.
Mick, I told you before, our personnel evals are meant to be 1-to-1, not
one to many. That's how I do it.
Yeah, 1 to many. You're a multicast man. I get it. It's I'm excited. I mean, and if the father of Hollywood would just stop complaining, we'd be good, right?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom Hanks. I understand, but you're Tom Hanks, right? He could be in anything forever, and I would believe it was him, right? Audra, what happened to Tom Hanks?
Yeah, so he was, I think he posted on Instagram or somewhere on social media that there was this AI version of him that was being used in an advertisement for like promoting a dental plan. And he's like, I didn't agree to this. They just used my image without my consent. And that's going to probably be an issue moving forward is, can you just make an AI version of whatever celebrity and use that for your advertising? It seems like that shouldn't necessarily be so simple. Yeah, so that happened.
I just wish they really used it for not grandfatherly or like fatherly Tom Hanks, but Turner and Hooch Tom Hanks. Like I want the 80s. Yeah,
Tom Hanks.
I mean, people forget that for a while Tom Hanks was the B team Steve Guttenberg, right? Like if you couldn't afford Steve Guttenberg, you got Tom Hanks. And I feel like that's who we need to bring back. Like no more of this Philadelphia, no more of this.
Oh, look at me. I'm still good at Forrest Gump and all the roles.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting in that I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. I'm reminded of like the old really crappy just dub, like it was a picture of someone and it was just like just lips talking over where their mouth would be, like you did, Ryan. But it's gotten so much better. Like the one for Tom Cruise, I believe, has been around for a while. So I only see it increasing because while there is a big discussion now we see with strike-related things in Hollywood about the use of that's the legitimate use. Yeah. The illegitimate use, I think, will still skyrocket.
Well, you talked about this a bit with Eve earlier this year around sextortion sort of stuff, Audra. I'm curious, like, I know this is actually part of the recent strikes in Hollywood with the Actors Guild. Like, obviously the WGA was talking about, screenplays generated, but now we're running into things where, actors who've died, who maybe signed contracts they didn't realize are being brought back as AI generated things. Right. Yeah. And what does that mean? And what money do you make off of that? Or your right to something, your likeliness being used?
Yeah, it's concerning. And I feel like the pace of technology is going to be so much faster than any legislation or,
always is.
Anything like that. It's just it. And that's going to be the challenge is in the early days of everything. How do you look out for yourself if you are an actor or if you're a writer or, how do you navigate that, right?
I mean, the obvious answer here is blockchain.
Is it?
It is actually one of the few true use cases, what I thought about was just like, if you're a reputable news agency and you release an image, or you're a photographer and you release an image, like this is actually where having blockchain suddenly becomes a reasonable, like, I want to trace the provenance of this image.
Yeah. Well, there was that meeting at the White House. They talked about watermarking,
right?
Yeah, with watermarking. And I don't know the logistics of how watermarking works and if there's some sort of blockchain like way to verify that. But I know a number of organizations, a number of companies like Microsoft and OpenAI, a number of other ones have said it's like an unofficial agreement, just like we're going to work toward this. But it'd be interesting to see if that becomes a requirement in the future to have some sort of watermark, or I don't know.
What if I screenshot it?
See, I don't know. I Yeah.
I just mean for this, like if you wanted to be able to see what the output was, like I want to see if this is real.
Yeah.
We've solved blockchain, Mick. That's all you need to know.
I don't think there's. I only found one use, and that was like to
Well, what about?
money from being laundered digitally.
I mean, what about
But
if we were to do
people keep going.
blockchain of your appearance tomorrow when you're speaking?
I would sell an NFT of the sneakers I'm going to wear tomorrow. I would definitely do that.
Do you like that subtle segue into our next segment?
Very good.
Well, we have events we need to get to first.
Fair enough.
So, yes, I think we have a list. Oh, security detail, of course. If you have not heard, we have a new podcast at Splunk. It's called The Security Detail. We interview experts about different industry verticals and the threat landscape for them. We actually have an episode that is coming out tomorrow with Brett Callow, who is a threat analyst at Microsoft. And I was able to speak with him about the threat landscape for education and specifically ransomware and data extortion groups targeting schools and universities and what that looks like and the best ways to defend against that. So it was a great conversation. And, Microsoft, where Brett works, has been very on top of tracking the MOVEit breach. So we talked quite a bit about that. So that'll come out tomorrow. And you can look at the QR code there to download it. And then I think we have a few more events. David Bianco is going to be speaking at the Security Onion Conference in Georgia later this week. Shannon and James are speaking at a conference in Australia, the cybersecurity conference there later this month. Mick, you are actually going to take part in an event tomorrow. Tell us about that. You're muted.
But I'm sure it was great.
Oh man, it's a hard mute button.
Yeah.
I want to build some drama up to it. So tomorrow, Google is hosting an event that Michael Kaiser and the gang from Defending Digital Campaigns are going to be putting on about the 2024 election. Happy election season to all who celebrate. Basically, it's a day of just making sure that all the threats that are potential to campaigns, all the tools and resources that are available to campaigns, because I don't think a lot of the lower campaigns are aware of the resources available to them, and kind of also why it's important and how to do it cheaply. That's kind of the big thing as far as campaigns, and I remember was doing it for little to no money.
Yeah, it's an important topic, and it's getting into that time of year for campaign season, right?
Yay.
Woo.
Yeah.
And then Conf, of course, June 10th through the 13th. So that is coming up
We are
around.
prepping that early, aren't we? This is
yes, around the corner. And of course, if you want alerts from Surge, you can sign up online for our quarterly newsletter. And anytime we have a rapid response, we'll send out an alert. And we also include Wombat facts in each of our newsletters. So I think that's that. Let's go ahead and move on now to our charity challenge.
And now, Splunk's Cybersecurity 60-second charity challenge. Remember the rules. You've got to get through an entire subject in 60 seconds, or you donate to today's charity of choice. Good luck!
All right, so today's charity challenge is all about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is October, and it is October 3rd, which is crazy that it's already that time of year. But the charity for this week is the Cybersecurity Education Foundation, which aims to deliver cybersecurity education for people and organizations to promote cybersecurity awareness and prepare them for cybersecurity careers. And so, with it being Awareness Month, the challenge today is to summarize your thoughts on cybersecurity awareness, the pros and the cons. Is it effective? Is it not effective? How could it be more effective? That's the gist of it. So, who wants to go first?
Well, are you picking which side we take, or are we just going to flip a digital coin?
Are you prepared for either side, or do you want to pick?
I will dance in whatever direction you would like us to dance, Audra.
Do you want to give both sides?
Ryan, did you prepare for both? Or you want to freestyle both?
I am just so incredible confident in everything that I do, Mick. I feel like I can just pick.
I know you mentioned that.
Why don't we give that to our new voice of God?
Daniela, who is pro and who is con?
To be clear, we are talking about Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to do, Ryan, your pro and Mick your against.
Perfect. Who wants to go first is the other question.
Mick, your choice as the reigning winner for 2023.
You know what? I will let you go first.
I am
okay?
shocked. I am shocked to hear that.
I'm giving you the rope, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to vamp for a second here. Have we picked which charity we're going to do?
I already announced the charity.
Damn it. All right.
You can't take any more time.
Okay. God, it's already going. So here's the thing about Cybersecurity Awareness Month. A lot of people still go through their lives blissfully unaware of the threats that face them every single day on the internet. And without incredible motivational speeches and posters and emails and lectures and Zoom webinars, how will our users know what's happening? I say this only partly in jest. For those of you who are very bored, feel free to read my master's thesis on the efficacy of spear phishing and education training, which actually did show a significant improvement in the reduction of clicks on spear phishing emails. Now, this has been going on, and thankfully, since 2014, we've completely solved and eradicated spear phishing. So we can see that this education of users against, I am not doing good on being pro Cybersecurity Awareness Month. What I will say is, for people who've never been exposed to these threats, there is a lot of value in this, and I think that there's things that we can really emphasize, like education on machine learning threats.
Well, I mean, your master's thesis, Ryan, that's pretty substantial, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's definitely not old at this point. I should have stood up for myself. I should have taken the con. Go for it, Mick.
All right, so it's October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month once again, and that's that one time of the year we magically care about cybersecurity and nothing else. It seems like we argue a lot internally as a community, whether it's CSAM or Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and that kind of takes away from it. You could look at Rob Joyce in a tweet from 2021. He said CSAM, and it's not the point. Did you know that 70% of data breaches are caused by human error? So people that are just going to be susceptible to get tricked by things in general, because we're people, you want me to be a cyber defender front lines and defending against all these 0 days we just talked about for the past 20 minutes, which is not going to happen. I barely remember where I put my keys, let alone my password combinations. The reason why MFA, we keep stressing it, is because that way there's a way you can get your password back when you forget it, because we make it be so complex with all these numbers and letters. So once a month we care about it, and that's supposed to last for the year, and it doesn't work, and that's why it's a bad idea.
Okay, let us know what you think in the comments. If you think Ryan won or Mick
No.
won.
Let's change the narrative here. If you think Cybersecurity Awareness Month is a good idea, vote for me.
Nope, it's all about the argument. Who made the better argument? Take away your own opinions for a minute. Who had the better argument? You can share it in the chat. I will say I appreciate the spear phishing research. That's interesting, although spear phishing is definitely not solved. So disinformation there. And Mick, I appreciate the point about 0 days, and really that's not the responsibility of an end user to worry about that. However, the number one attack vector is phishing. So whose responsibility is it, right? Like, is it the end user? Is it us? Like, who? Thank you, David. I won.
I mean, that's a reasonable outcome.
Is it? Mitch, you have a vote from Victoria. I'm guessing that's a vote if she thinks you're funny. So there you go.
Who is Mitch?
I don't know. It's the same person as Marcus.
What's funny?
Listen, Michelle.
You know what's funny? Before we started this live stream, I accidentally called Mitch, and he got really mad at me.
Like, it was like a portmanteau of my name. She was just, so Mitch, how was the weekend? I was like, who?
And it was a genuine accident. It just came out that way. I was like combining Mick and Baccio, and it came out Mitch.
I like Michio.
It's okay, Victoria. I've done it too.
Michio. Oh, sorry, Victoria. I called him Marcus earlier. I've known him for 10 years. It's fine. It's completely.
Yeah. So Ryan, you have a vote because of quantitative metrics.
Well, kind of. I think Kevin's saying like yes, but Mick is right. So
okay, that's fair. That's fair.
All right.
Ryan had stats that supported an outdated theory.
Well, so who won? Let's see.
I vote Mick. It's
okay, because you agree with his stance. So maybe
the argument is solid. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Mick won. You got another vote. So there you go.
I will happily be donating to this cause. So
yes. Well, we're not
we're not done
talking
talking
about
about
it.
this. Yeah.
No. We have another clip to roll, and then we'll continue to talk about it because we have a lot of thoughts. So let's go ahead and do the deep dive.
And now we talk about things that just happen to be on our minds with who's ever here, because we made this up before I knew who'd accept my meeting invite.
So I don't think people know this, but for those in the audience, I put up Mick and my head because that's actually a video of Audra in the Gulf of Mexico scuba diving. So most people don't know that.
It's not. I was excluded from that clip, but that's okay. I won't take it
Tons of
personally.
misinformation research. First your phishing stats, now the scuba video.
Listen, Mitch, I don't care what you say, Marcus. None of this is true.
Yep. Well, okay. So whose responsibility is it? Are end users responsible for anything cybersecurity related? I feel like we have to establish that before we can even talk about the effectiveness.
For me, it's that users are evil, right? I think, and I say this with love because I'm evil, you're evil. We're all just trying to do our job better or faster. And security at the end of the day does tend to get in the way of doing your job, right? Like multi-factor adds time. I was at a conference last week, the Gartner Security and Risk Management Conference, and they actually had a good, session on this where they just talked about the amount of time that adds up throughout the week and out the year of just doing basic security tasks of like changing your password. And if you multiply, screwing with your password because you have to add an extra 1 on the end of every single password that you have. As it goes on and on and on, like suddenly you're like, oh, wow, that actually just cost our company 2,000 hours or something like that for the year for our one password change a month in lost productivity. When you look at the amount of time it takes for my multi-factor authentication, when you look at like, oh, I'm just trying to get this file over this guy and I have to do all this extra work, but I could just put it on GitHub or I could put it on Box or whatever and just send it to them or put it on, VirusTotal and share it via a dead drop resolver. Right? Like these are all things that people they know the dangers here. They know they're not supposed to do it. I think for me, a lot of the cybersecurity, like the awareness is there. Like the myth is that if we tell people it's bad, they're going to stop doing it. Like I know that I shouldn't drink as much and I know I shouldn't eat as much chocolate, but kale sucks and I like the taste of chocolate. So I'm going to eat chocolate and not eat kale. There you go.
That's all very fair.
This is all taken, by the way, by Mary Mezzagilayo, who gave a keynote last year on the behavioral science of security. Kirsty Payne turned me onto it. It's a very good talk, and I'm just cribbing Mary's incredible ideas. So there you go.
Well, I think that's a great point. And I know that Jeff just put in the chat on LinkedIn a ChatGPT answer because, of course, we need to ask ChatGPT its opinion about Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Can feel like a fleeting focus on a year-round issue. There's a risk of checkbox compliance, where people go through the motions without fully grasping the importance. The 1-month spotlight might create a sense of complacency, making people think they're covered for the rest of the year. In essence, the initiative could only succeed if it's part of an ongoing integrated security strategy.
So I would like to ask someone to do a ChatGPT query of, in 2 sentences, explain why Cybersecurity Awareness Month is not a great idea in rural Australian lingo. And then we'll read that out too. So there we go.
My issue here is that we I think we're conflating a lot of things in general, right? Phishing's number one attack vector. But it's really cyber-enabled fraud, right? Fraud, I think, is always going to be number one. That's really what we're trying to prevent with Cyber Awareness Month. It's really the end state, the passwords, everything else. I liken it to when you open your mailbox. I get a lot of things that look super official that tell me I need to buy insurance or that my homeowner policy is expired or things like that. And it's, you can engage with it or not, and it's up to you. I think the fraud on that level, just, the old fashioned snail mail or just real life fraud. What we see now is just cyber-enabled fraud, and we're trying to prevent that. But trying to prevent fraud, just because it happens in computers, it happens in real life, and we're trying to prevent that overall ecosystem is always going to be an uphill battle. I think where we go wrong is that 1 month a year. Ryan, you said something earlier that was super prescient, where it was, we look at it from our lens, maybe Cybersecurity Awareness Month needs to be for security people.
Yep.
Like maybe you need to change your messaging and stop yelling into an echo chamber. If you go to a security conference and tell me about MFA, I kind of want to punch you.
And I think, there's obviously a human nature component, Ryan, which you mentioned, knowing how people are by default. They're trying to just get through their day, and cybersecurity is not a number one concern for a reason. I actually talked to Brett about that in the interview for the podcast. We were talking about, do parents care about ransomware attacks on schools? And it's like, no, they care about school funding to make sure their dilapidated buildings are replaced and, just that they have the right, resources that they need. So there's all kinds of things to think about. So how do you make cybersecurity easier for the end user? And I think that's the responsibility of, security professionals to try to make it as default secure as possible so that they don't get the email to begin with, right? Ways to try to prevent that from happening. Of course, the end user needs to be aware, because the way things stand today, that's not realistic. But it's a tough thing. I think that there is a requirement of awareness because of the way things are today. People need to be aware that this is a problem and that they play a role in that. But I think within the cybersecurity community, there needs to be more of a push to make that less of a responsibility on the end user, if that makes sense.
I would take that upstream. And cybersecurity professionals, we can only do so much. I think the companies that we work for, that's secure by design that we keep talking about, that needs to be instilled from there. And DHS since September 11th, we've heard the see something, say something, right? And having cyber just be a portion of that is something I think that would do well. And kind of, we're seeing, in that vein, CISA just announced their public service awareness campaign that we saw last week. And that's great. And I think we're heading in that direction. But again, like if we're just, hey, use a strong password, we're really missing the boat.
And these are my issues, right? Like, let's pick on two things are the primary. And by the way, I assume Audra is giggling because Dennis, thank you. ChatGPT answer, oi mate, out in the bush, we're more worried about snakes and ruse than those cyber bludgers. So why bother? I love it. Because let's pull on two things. Changing your password and then spear phishing emails, right? So I have used password phrases for many years, like horse battery stapler. Love them. That makes it easier for me to understand. It doesn't matter how complex my password is when databases are being breached and my password is being removed, like exfilled immediately, right? Like
my token does nothing if my provider gets hacked.
Right. And the second, like I look at spear phishing email awareness training, this like as ridiculous in some ways, because I know we're taking some hard stances here, but we go through all this effort telling people not to do this. And then the businesses, right, our businesses, our customers will then sign up for a new service, or Amazon will get a new, they'll not picking on Amazon, obviously, or anyone on this, but like you'll use a marketing campaign, like to send out internal spear phishing training, or not spear phishing training, just like, hey, by the way, there's a service and it's coming from an alert service that a third-party marketing thing did in order to be able to scale out these emails to 100,000 employees. So now you're getting an email that's targeted towards you, that's 100% legitimate, but it's coming from a 14-domain long, subdomain long, CDN. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, why didn't you click on your required thing? Like, how would you know? And I'm like, how would you know if you're looking at this? There's no way for you to identify the difference between these two. But somehow spear phishing training is supposed to make you think that I'm saved against this. Like, it's really hard. Like, we're not doing favors.
I think spear phishing email training teaches us if I ignore my email and it's important, they'll email again. That's really what the takeaway is there. Yes,
it's like that meme where you're congratulated for passing the phishing test, but it's because you don't check your email. Right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the only reason I keep passing our cybersecurity training. So,
well, of course.
For me, that's where the cyber, like, I wish, Mick, and we were talking about this earlier, right? Like, I would rather, and Gartner had a really good bit on this, which I really liked. It was actually a pretty useful talk they gave. I recommend watching it if you can, both Mary's and then this year's keynote. And it was really around UX friction. So we're just reducing, like, instead of putting the burden on the users, just like what Mick was saying earlier, like, we should be doing more cybersecurity awareness just targeted at developers and targeted at people who are making these platforms, because that's where a lot of these issues are, of making, like, just help people make better choices to do their job more securely.
I think awareness around specific things that are happening. Cybersecurity awareness is fantastic. Relegating it to 1 month, I think, is terrible. And preaching just the basic things, I don't think is going to work. I think Sean Gallagher, who is over at Sophos, has done some fantastic reporting on pig butchering. Shazupam is basically, it's tales of old time. It's just people getting scammed out of money that is cyber enabled. So it starts with that, solicited text messages, things like that. That I think should be the focus of a lot of awareness, like targeted campaigns, rather than, hey, use a password manager. No, I got that part. What else do you got? And I think that would go a lot farther and be more and resonate a lot more, especially with specific communities.
Mm-hmm.
We see this even, I see this at every place we ever work, right? Like cybersecurity companies work really hard to make sure what do we always say? You need to patch your stuff, right? MFA and have 100% patching. How irritated am I when I'm in the middle of a meeting and I just keep getting these pop-ups that say patch your stuff, and I'm like, I'm a cybersecurity professional. I still click decline because I'm in the middle of the meeting. And then we see rage emails from people internally, every company I've ever worked, like, I don't understand, I was doing something and you need to do better at making sure we don't, we patch these at the right time. These people know what the risks are. I know what the risks are, and I'm still choosing to wait because it inconveniences me. So the people are aware of the threats. I guess that's I think maybe we need to make aware of the risks or aware of the consequences. Cybersecurity Consequence Month, F around and find out. I
don't know, because the amount of people I know that I think there was a direct correlation to inbox 0 people and people that keep all their systems patched. And then Ryan's email inbox number. And the non-patching.
I just 5 digits is fine.
Is it? Oh God, that gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
See?
I'm an inbox 0 person.
And she patches. That's what I'm saying. There's a correlation.
There's a 1-to-1 there. I agree with Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I especially love the stuff Rob Joyce is doing. That's a very fun way to do it. It's just, I want more targeted cybersecurity. I want targeted awareness month. TAM. There we go.
Yeah. Or just ongoing, just making it a continual effort.
It's a thing. You use cyber things every day. So be aware of it every day. That's there's a scammer out there likely trying to get your money. Shocker, right?
Yeah. And it just kind of bleeds into so many other topics like data privacy, media literacy, with disinformation. It's just there's so many things that people could be that affect them, and that's important to be aware of. But it's a matter of, are they going to take that upon themselves to learn that, or are there ways to learn it?
We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. Dr. Fetterman's done a whole bunch of work on ML adversary work, right? And I still think there is sometimes when I talk to folks about it, they're like, I can barely get my systems patched. Why am I going to worry about that? But I think that's a great example of not a lot of people know, as every business in the world starts adapting LLMs, there is not awareness around the threats to what those pose to your organization. We had this conversation. Mick and I were talking to some former Govy folks, and we were talking about what happens when you have. So for those of you who don't know, if you work in the government and you have classified data that spills, it's called a spillage, right? So it goes from a classified network into an unclassified network, and you have literal top secret information on hard drives that are unclassified. You have to do a routine.
Shut it down.
You shut it down. You delete the hard drives. You remove.
You carve out Exchange inboxes. You do all the things.
Yeah, you literally are taking a drill or a hammer or a degaussing magnet. There's all this work to get rid of that. And my question became, what happens when you have an LLM that has been trained on classified data for months and you didn't know?
Let's say it browsed the War Thunder forums.
Yeah, it's just an LLM trained on War Thunder. It loves spicy F-22s.
It's like shadow AI. Is that what we could call that? Shadow AI? Did I just create a new word, or did someone else
come up with
that?
Get it to Gartner immediately. Forrester, watch out.
Okay, I claimed it first. Yeah, October 3rd.
Today, October 3rd.
The fifth quadrant that just goes towards people.
It's just the fifth quadrant. It's the Z-axis of the wave. yeah, I mean, these are the things, like, those are areas I might look at for Cybersecurity Awareness Month for our internal developers, rather than telling people about the threats of spear phishing for the, I don't know. It's
Gear it towards your audience. What?
I know. I love how international, and also we were beat here. I'm probably going to butcher her name. Arun Kumar said cybersecurity awareness should be a year-round effort, not just limited to 1 month. But he did not pull out the new 5th quadrant there, Audra. So you are shadow AI.
We're safe.
You're safe.
Okay.
Ask Marcus how a patent and trademark works. They're super in.
Are you talking about yourself, Mitch?
Yes.
Mitch. Oh, man.
All right.
Well, we should probably wrap up because we do have another live stream. So if you have another free hour, you should stay on Splunk's LinkedIn or YouTube page, wherever you're watching this, because we have another live stream coming up in about 10 minutes.
Well, we don't.
Well, it's not us, but it's Splunk, which is us, right? So
Yeah.
this is CX Day, which is a Customer Experience Day. So we're going to have a live stream on that, just reflecting on driving exceptional experiences at Splunk. So that is coming up here in about 9 minutes. But any closing remarks, Ryan and Mitch?
Yes.
Marcus?
Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, there is a nationwide test of the FEMA emergency alert system. So every phone is going to get a loud beep attached to it, and that test message is going to go through. I think it's super important for people to be aware of it. If you are in a place where you have a phone and maybe don't want people to know you have a phone.
Hold on, I got to stop here. Why are you speaking 1/3 speed? Like, these people are not your grandparents. Like, you're just, your cadence slowed down.
It's super important.
So he's trying to emphasize the importance.
Everybody's phone's going to beep. So if you're in a place where
you're an
your phone
American
shouldn't
in
be
Europe
beeping,
trying to
hide your
talk to
phone.
someone. I'm just saying. It's like, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Frenchman. I will speak slower and louder for you.
I just think we should make people aware that every phone tomorrow is going to beep at 2 p.m. So maybe you're in a situation where you have a phone and you don't want somebody to know you have a phone. It's going to beep tomorrow.
So a couple of years ago, this happened at .conf, is when they did the alert, and we actually had people who worked in to the minute into their presentation during .conf when that beep was going to occur. Other people did not, and were very confused. So Mitch, are you on? Is your panel at 2 p.m. Eastern?
My panel is closed to the public. It's a media session, and it's early in the morning. So I'm going to stick around, and I'll make sure my phone is, in the car.
In the glove box.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're all done. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thanks for all the people putting comments. And we'll see you. Oh, next week we have who's next week?
We have Patrick Gray from Risky Business. If you listen to the Risky Biz podcast, we have Patrick Gray on as our next interview guest.
Very
Shannon
meta.
Davis had a chance to interview him about what it takes to create the podcast, which was super interesting because I just am learning about podcasting too, and a bunch of other topics. So that's going to be next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, our normal time. And also I will update the event that this is on with all of the links to the resources we talked about today. So that'll be updated here in a little bit. But I think with that, we'll go ahead and end this, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
There we go. And we didn't even talk about Cisco.
Bye, everyone.
Surge.